Hello ladies and gentlemen, whether this be my first video you're watching or not, my name is OKGov and I bid you all the warmest of welcomes to another episode in my series on the Witcher lore, and welcome to the land of 1,000 Fables. The realm that is the land of 1,000 Fables, also known as the Fablesphere, is in actual fact entirely an illusion. One created and dreamt up by Artorius Vigo, who was a Nilfgaardian mage that made the world for Anna Henrietta, the current Duchess of Toussaint, and Sylvia Anna, her sister, when they were both children. The inhabitants of such a land are various different creatures and beings from fairy tales and legends, which we will go into more detail later. The way the mage made it possible to transcend to such a world from reality was done by speaking the incantation Expecto Lundum while reading a magical book named, very rightly, The Land of 1,000 Fables. Largely there is not a lot to say as much as there is to see in this world, for it is a very colourful and very vibrant land, and describing it would be very counterproductive, so instead I will be telling you about the beings that live there and the various different tales and history behind each of them. As some of you may already know, most of what is inside of the Fablesphere is actually based off of our own fairy tales, particularly those by the brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen. And a fun little thing that a lot of people might not actually know is that stories such as Cinderella, for example, were actually very dark and pretty gritty before a certain studio got their hands on it, and it's very wonderfully represented inside of The Witcher as they've created the world and they leave in some of that darkness from the original stories, which to me is just amazing because I love twisted things like that, so yeah, it's just awesome. Also, it's important to mention that there is a note inside of the book which states that the spell keeping the world alive will destabilize in June 1252, which is what has led to many of the things going wrong inside of the world, because obviously the world was created for children to run around in and be safe inside of, but obviously in the current version that it is, it's not at all safe, and it's in fact completely the opposite. It's a very dangerous place now, because everything has basically gone sideways and it's all screwed up. Now there are so many different creatures to go over that I cannot in any way list them all in really great detail. However, if you want to know anything further about each of them, you may already know some of the fairy tales behind them, but you can also go to the wiki and I've linked the links below. But otherwise I'm going to go over quite generally speaking about the tales behind them and briefly covering them, but otherwise most of them have a little bit more behind them in terms of the actual dates, the actual mythos and everything else, so if you're really keen on knowing every last detail then by all means you'll know where the original tale came from, so I'm very certain you can find it somewhere on the internet. Firstly, we have the Musicians of BLAVIKEN, a group of beings that are comprised of a rooster standing on top of a cat that stands on a dog who is standing on a donkey that is standing on a hill. They are based off of a story by the brothers Grimm called The Town Musicians of Brenham, a tale of 4 farm animals past their prime years in life and tired of being mistreated by their owners, all decide to leave their home and set out together for a town named Brenham. The story is quite complicated in its entirety, but a few things happen along the way, and basically to sum it up, they end up dispatching a group of thieves and the townsfolk are very thankful, leading to them becoming somewhat of a legend. And the actual place, Brenham, inside Germany, has a statue dedicated to this specific tale. The story of Little Red Riding Hood is very well known by thousands of people, being that of a girl who goes to visit her grandmother, only to find that she has been eaten by a wolf that has taken her place in hopes to eat her too. However, inside of the Fablesphere, since the destabilization of the illusion, something very wrong happened, or at least more wrong than the tale is already. The big bad wolf grew angrier and angrier with Little Red Riding Hood until finally throwing her and the hunter down a well. The hunter, I can only assume, being the man there to kill the wolf or at least help somehow. After her death, the big bad wolf took to drinking and degenerated from his character into a grovelling husk of what he once had been, as he was created initially to act out the scenes from the beloved tale for the sisters when they came to visit the land. So this is the first case of when you really see that something that was created originally just for harmless kind of reenactment, the story kind of actually became true, except has its own twist. Wandering the land, you can also come across these 5 characters that are interconnected in a way that either speaking to one of them will inevitably lead you to the other, or that they're all from the same fairy tale. Firstly, Jack is the boy from the English tale Jack and the Beanstalk. The story of the poor boy who sells his family cow for 3 beans that he assumes are magic, and they sprout into a beanstalk that leads him up to a giant's kingdom in the sky. There he finds, along with a golden harp, a goose that lays golden eggs called BALBINA. He steals both of them, slaying the giant that is chasing him by cutting down the beanstalk and letting him fall to his death. Or at least that is how the original tale goes. Inside of the Fablesphere, however, the cloud giant is still alive, inhabiting the castle in the sky. Once a being of pleasant nature and thought to be created to carry the 2 girls around whenever they came to visit the land, he became a very dangerous monster as the world fell apart. The final straw being when Jack stole the goose, leading to him becoming enraged, killing and throwing any who ventured near his crumbling castle without any warning. The other boy named Joss is mentioned by Jack, and when you encounter him you must interpret everything he says as the opposite, for he is the boy that cried wolf. It being a Greek tale where a young lad runs out into the streets every night crying that there is a wolf lurking about, leading to the gathering of the townsfolk who become more and more annoyed learning that the boy is lying to them, until finally on the last night there is the actual threat of a wolf. The boy cries for help, but no one comes because they all think he is lying, and the boy is killed and eaten alive. The Wicked Witch in this case is one from the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel, however inside of the Fablesphere is trying to eat Jack. If you know anything about the original tale, it consisted of a house made of gingerbread and other sweet treats to try and lure children inside to be fattened up and cooked. It should be noted that inside of the world of The Witcher, these witches do not only eat humans but have mastered how to cook them. They are said to be particularly fond of children's liver fried in butter and served in a saffron sauce, balsamic vinegar marinated fingers roasted to a golden crisp, and yes, even freshly squeezed corpse juice. So these are obviously very kind, wonderful old ladies who
We'll just offer you a little sweet. It's fine, love, don't worry about it.
This is mostly more of an Easter egg than anything else, as he's not technically a character in the way that he's alive or of any particular consequence. The legs that are dressed in orange stockings sticking out from underneath the house are a tribute to the very famous story The Wizard of Oz and the movie from 1939 with Judy Garland. There is another reference to it, which is the yellow brick road that can be found snaking through the countryside, and in my opinion is a really nice nod to something from so long ago that some people could completely overlook unless they obviously knew the story, which is very well known by now. The German tale of Rapunzel has seen many adaptations, the original story being incredibly dark and gruesome, more so than you might even expect. Inside of the Fablesphere, at the bottom of the steps to the tower, can be found the broken body of Prince Charming, who fell to his death while likely trying to rescue his love. Inside of that same tower hangs the body of Longlocks. Having been there for so many years and waiting for the prince who never came because he died, she hung herself out of loneliness with the very hair that the prince would have used to climb to her and save her. After her death, the ghostly spectre of herself haunts the tower in agony of what was lost and what never came to be. Her final words, very sadly, were, "Well, since it seems this hair won't be pulling up any knights in shining armour, might as well put it to some use," which is very bloody depressing. And speaking of tragic stories, the one of the little Flint girl is possibly even more tragic. This character is based off of a Danish story by Hans Christian Andersen called The Little Match Girl. The tale of the girl who tries to sell matches on a cold New Year's Eve who cannot go home until she has sold enough because otherwise her father would beat her. Having hypothermia, she tries to take shelter in a small nook down an alley. She lights the matches to keep herself warm, seeing visions of many wonderful things in the flames, including that of her grandmother being the only person who ever showed her any kindness and love. In a desperate attempt to keep that vision alive, she lights the entire bundle of matches that she has all at once. Eventually the cold kills the girl and her grandmother carries her soul to heaven. She dies with a smile on her face, and any who saw her frozen body the next morning felt pity for her despite none having done so while she was still alive. In the land of 1,000 Fables, however, since she cannot sell flint, she turns to selling tobacco, alcohol and fist tech, which is essentially a drug. This is in fact one of the very few tales that becomes nicer inside of what CG Projekt created and actually has more of a happier ending because she becomes, you know, the dealer, so I mean, it seems like the next logical step, right? Can you imagine what that conversation would have been like for all the people at CG Projekt Red to be sort of sitting around a table and they're like, well, you know the story of the little match girl? How about instead of it ending with her grandmother taking her to heaven, she just becomes a drug dealer? And I'm mentioning these two characters as well because they're located close to where the little Flint girl is, and these are two characters that you can't really interact with them, but they pay homages to other stories. Billy Goat being a reference to a Polish children's comic back from 1933, and of course Puss in Boots, who is undoubtedly one of the most famously known fairy tale characters for centuries and centuries gone. This is one of the more obscure references, which is a dragon found dead near the tower of Longlocks, having died from something exploding from within inside itself. It is a reference to the Wawel or Wawel dragon from Polish folklore, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering that pronunciation, but I really have no idea which way it goes. The legend, however, is of a creature that plagued Poland for many years, demanding a weekly offering of cattle or else it would devour humans and destroy the towns and cities of the country. No knight nor army could defeat it in combat, so instead the sons of the king came up with a trick. They fed the dragon a calf skin stuffed with smouldering sulphur, causing his fiery death. But then the brothers argued about who deserved the honor for slaying the dragon. The older brother killed the younger one, telling the others that the dragon had killed him. When the brother finally became king, his secret was revealed and he got expelled from the country, the city then being named in recognition of the brave and innocent younger brother, and that is why the dragon in the Fablesphere lies there dead, having been killed from the inside out. There is not a lot to say for these three characters. They are obviously based off of the tale of the three little pigs that are hunted by a wolf. Each pig builds their own house, one of straw, one of sticks and one of bricks. The wolf comes along, blows down every house but the one made of bricks, and is left unable to eat them. However, in this case, the three little pigs were once docile and kind creatures, but once the spell destabilized, became very different creatures altogether. They became aggressive out of necessity in order to survive in the world that was falling apart, being feral up to the point they would attack anyone who came even close of what was left of their brick house. The Pied Piper can be found travelling around the Fablesphere, followed by a group of rats that are infatuated by his musical tunes. He is based off of the German tale The Pied Piper, the story of a rat catcher hired by the town to lure rats away with his magic pipe. However, when those citizens refuse to pay for his services, he retaliates by using his instrument's magical powers on the children of the village, leading them away as he had the rats, supposedly into a cave where they never ever return from. Again, he is a character you can't interact with, but instead you see walking about the land and is more of a homage and an Easter egg than anything else. These creatures are the more varied and interesting of those inside the Fablesphere, and I think even made an appearance in The Witcher 1. They are a small humanoid people who collect herbs, hoe the ground and cut mushrooms and live very peacefully. They tend to run away and stay to themselves, never causing many serious injuries to any who venture too close, and are often very fond of alcohol. They are based off of what can only be seen as something that would resemble a typical Irish goblin or leprechaun from Irish mythology. They are also very joyous and very lively beings without wanting to cause any trouble or disturb others, living inside their villages very peacefully. Now, unlike GRIGGS, these little buggers may look harmless and gentle and are anything but that. They were created inside of the Fablesphere to look after the two girls whenever they would come to visit and to make sure that they came to no harm. But given the current state of the sphere, they will thus harm anyone who crosses their path. They are warlike and very aggressive creatures created to kill or fight until death, protecting whoever or whatever is under their charge. They are not based off of anything in particular, as pixies vary greatly from mythology to mythology, but in this case they were made so that any who tried to invade the Fablesphere would be taken care of very, very quickly. Thumbelina is a tiny girl from the fairy tale again by Hans Christian Andersen, who lives inside of her own miniature world, largely not affecting anything else inside of the Fablesphere. The story behind the character is pretty long and complicated, but to briefly tell you, it starts with a beggar woman who gives a peasant's wife a barley corn in exchange for some food. After the barley corn is planted and sprouts, a tiny girl, Thumbelina, emerges from its flower and the story begins. However, inside of the Fablesphere, the most you can do is step on her and kill her, so try not to do that because you'll probably end up annoying someone. And also down low to the ground can be found the WOLPERTINGER, which is a mixture of several species. In this case it is a rabbit with wings, canine teeth and the antlers of a deer. The origin of their creation lies in Bavaria, but there are a lot of other stories of similar beings like the jackalope for instance, which exists inside of North America. There isn't a particular fable behind them, they are largely just creatures that inhabit the illusion as well. You'd be hard pressed to find many people who don't know the story of the girl who wandered into the house of the three bears, trying their porridge and their beds until comfortable and her appetite sated. In the Fablesphere, however, Goldilocks is slain by the three bears after the spell destabilizes, lying dead against the table in a manner some would say was even deservingly. The bears having killed her for trying to steal their food once again, and now that the spell is how it is, will indeed kill any who do so. The character known simply as Emperor was another illusion created to entertain. Unlike most things and people inside of the Fablesphere, he did not lose his mind nor change many of his actions, instead he continued on as if all were normal, proclaiming that his new clothes were amazing. The Emperor comes from the story The Emperor's New Clothes, again written by Hans Christian Andersen. It was and still is a short story about two weavers who promise the Emperor a new suit of clothes that they say will be invisible to any who are unfit for their positions, stupid or incompetent, while in reality they make no clothes at all, making everyone believe the clothes are invisible to them. When the Emperor then parades before his subjects in his new clothes, no one dares say that they do not see any clothes in fear of being seen as stupid. The actual point of the story is pretty cool really, because when you look at it from a more idiomatic standpoint, you can see there's a deeper meaning. That being how things widely accepted as true or as seen as being praiseworthy is only due to the unwillingness of the general population to criticize it, or are afraid of being seen as going against popular opinion. Basically, in layman's terms, everyone believing something because they are told it's true and they are not wanting to be the odd one out. And for last, I saved arguably one of the most magical creatures, that being none other than the majestic unicorn. And when people aren't making love on top of these beasts, because obviously what else do you do with a fucking unicorn, they are actually sentient creatures that came to the Witcher world during the conjunction of these spheres. They use telepathy to communicate with each other, and their horns can be used as an antidote to poisons and can even detect them. Their colours strangely change with age, and they have the incredible ability to move between parallel realities and even back and forth through time. They tend to appear to those who are kind of heart, as they despise evil in any form or manner, staying largely to themselves as not to be involved with such things. Inside of the Fablesphere, they were obviously an illusion created for the sisters for while they visited, to either ride or to just look at them or to just keep them company. Many mythologies say many varying things about these creatures, and all have their own stories and their own ideas about what they are and where they came from, but generally speaking they are always seen as magic, gentle creatures that are overall fearful of humans but incredibly powerful. And that about covers everything that you'll find inside of the land of 1,000 Fables. I didn't really want to go into much detail from a story perspective when it comes to Geralt and what happens, because again I want to keep these videos generally speaking without any spoilers. This was a fun video to make though, and it's the first time I've really dipped into our own mythologies in order to explain something inside of the game, but I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I wanted to say again that my Patreon is up and running now. There's a link down below, and eventually I'm going to add some more tiers and bring it all together a little better, but as it stands right now it's just there to help me out a little bit and just help me get more regular with what I'm making. Leave a comment down below about anything you'd like me to cover next, because otherwise I'm going to be looking at more obscure things in the Witcher world, and hopefully you'll find that interesting. But otherwise, if there's more than a few comments on one particular thing that people would like to see, then I will make that video happen next. As always, thank you so much for watching, and please share this video around if you liked it, and until the next one, you all go and have a very, very good day. Illiwaka.